Good morning. It's a pleasure to be joining you again this morning. Apologies that it's slightly later than intended. Able to finally get my laptop to respond. It was doing lots of crashing this morning. We're looking again this morning at Psalm 81. And so I'll read the Psalm once more, the whole way through, and then we'll be looking from verses 8 through to the end, verses 8 through to 16. So Psalm 81. Lord, just singing about you makes me strong, so I'll keep shouting for joy to Jacob's God, my champion. Let the celebration begin. I will sing with drum accompaniment and with the sweet sound of the harp and guitar strumming. Go ahead, blow the Jubilee trumpet to begin the feast. Blow it before every joyous celebration and festival, for God has given us these seasons of joy, days that he decreed for us to celebrate and rejoice. He's given these feasts to remind us of his triumph over Egypt, which ended our slavery in a strange and foreign land. Then I heard the message in an unknown tongue, as he said to me, I have removed your back-breaking burdens and have freed your hands from the hard labor and toil. You called out to me in your time of trouble, and I rescued you. I came down from the realm of the secret place of thunder where mysteries hide. I came down to save you. I tested your hearts at the place where there was no water to drink, the place of your bitter argument with me. Listen to me, my dear people, for I'm warning you, and you'd better listen well. For I hold something against you. Don't ever be guilty of worshipping any other god but me. I am your only God, the living God. Wasn't I the one who broke the strongholds over you and raised you up out of bondage? Open your mouth with a mighty decree. I will fulfill it now. You'll see. The words that you speak, so shall it be. But my people still wouldn't listen. My princely people would not yield to me. So I lifted my grace from off of their lives, and I surrendered them to the stubbornness of their hearts, for they were living according to their own selfish fantasies. Oh, that my people would once and for all listen to me, and walk faithfully in my footsteps, following my ways. Then, and only then, will I conquer your every foe, and tell every one of them, you must go. Those who hate my ways will cringe before me, and their punishment will be eternal. But I will feed you with my spiritual bread. You will feast and be satisfied with me, feeding on my revelation truth like honey, dripping from the cliffs of the high place. So yesterday morning we were looking at the idea of God kind of calling us back into those places of remembrance, back into that covenant relationship, and that being designed around feasts and being designed around celebrations, that Israel would come into this place of praise and this place of remembering, and particularly looked at Meribor, the place where the water came from the rock. Where these verses today, the tone slightly changes. Here on in from verse 8, there's a slight shift where we see kind of the tone within this psalm shift from possibly as much of a joyous place to more of a questioning. And it almost sort of strikes us with these questions ourselves, where we may have asked the question, who is this God we are remembering? What do these stories tell us about him? We then come face to face with him as he calls for our ear, rather than it being about us remembering and wrestling with those questions. It's now from God's direction again towards us of come back to that place. And verse 8 shows that it isn't simply a kind of a one directional relationship either, but that it is a conversation, that we are called into this conversation when we enter covenant relationship with God. It says, listen to me, my dear people. It is a call from God to his worshipping people to not only open their mouths and celebrate and joy, but also to hear back the response and the dialogue engaged in conversation. These verses are a callback to covenant relationship with God. It harkens the same sentiment that's rung in James chapter 4, those verses 1 to 6 that I spoke on Sunday, where James is encouraging the believers to choose God's way and fully commit to their relationship with the Lord. So too do we see this here in Psalm 81, except it is God calling on his people to come back to this first place of covenant relationship, this first love, if you like, and to remember exactly what kind of relationship this is and it looks like. And it's not just a fling or a quick fix, but it is a lifetime relationship, an eternal love relationship between bride and bridegroom. God himself here is reminding the Israelites of who he is. He is reminding them that he is the one who brought them out of slavery and out of bondage. He is reminding them of his nature and his character. And then in verse 10, it also reminds us with a beautiful picture of God's faithfulness. God made a promise to be faithful to his people, and he provided on countless occasions throughout their wandering in the desert, of which this psalm is particularly remembering. It was a call to faith, a call to anticipation that God would come through, that he would provide, and that he would do it. The faith action preceded the fulfillment of the provision, however. Promises such as with the rock at Meribah, the faith action preceded the fulfillment of the promise. And so it's here in verse 10 that we see this beautiful picture of God's faithfulness, of that picture of faith, the faith action preceding the revelation or the fulfillment of the promise. And it's also implied here that the reverse is also the same, that if they did not open their mouth in faith, if they did not instigate through an action of faith, then provision, promise couldn't be fulfilled. It was as if it was a blanket smothering the oxygen of faith, and therefore the fire can't burn, it instead dies. So this is what verse 10 says. Helpfully, my book had flipped over. So this is verse 10. I am your only God, the living God. Wasn't I the one who broke the strongholds over you and raised you up out of bondage? Open your mouth with a mighty decree. I will fulfill it now. You'll see the words that you speak. So shall it be. This is the faith action preceding the fulfillment of the promise. It is stoking the fire rather than smothering it, and it's stoking it, it's letting the oxygen get to it and the fire burn and the promise be fulfilled. Spurgeon puts it as such, and I think this is a really beautiful way of looking at it, particularly tying with what this analogy in this psalm is talking about. Spurgeon says, when the mother bird brings food, she never has to ask the little ones to open their mouths wide. Her only difficulty is to fill the great width which they are quite sure to present to her. Appetite and eagerness are never lacking. They are utterly insatiable. Picture a nest of little birds reaching up their mouths and all opening them as wide as they can. This is like faith. It's like us as the baby birds, or us as the birds being fed by their mother, opening our mouths well before our mouths are ready. We have this strong appetite and hunger for God to come through, for God to meet with us, for us to see the revelation of who God is, the truth of who God is, and God is there with the food to fulfill it. He's there ready to fill our faith action. And when we then get these moments where our mouths haven't been filled, we often, though, end up blaming God. I certainly know so many people I've heard where it's like, but God didn't fill my mouth. God didn't do this. God didn't do that. Or, I can't follow God because of this, or I'm really struggling with God because of this. And all of that is valid. I don't want to discount any of that at all. I don't want to discount the walk and the wrestling with God. It was 100% valid. But blaming him for not coming through, or for not keeping his promise, or for even deceiving us about who he is, I think can sometimes be dangerous, because the question I think we first need to open is, did we ask is, did we open our mouths first in expectancy with faith? Spurgeon simply sums this up by saying, our cup is small and we blame the fountain. And I think there are moments where we really have gone forward in faith, and we are expecting God to come through, and it is 100% valid to wrestle with that. And it's also 100% valid to wrestle even when we haven't stepped out in faith. But I think there is a question there over blaming. As Spurgeon said, our cup is small and we blame the fountain. God is overflowing. He is an endless fountain, a spring that never runs dry, the fountain that never depletes. And our cup is small. And are we allowing it to overflow? Are we sat there holding it in the flow of the water, letting it overflow? I personally found this a really great challenge, reading this through, hearing Spurgeon's challenge and the way he sums it up, going back to the psalm and letting God speak to me in that challenge. And it got me thinking, how often do I look at my cup and think, this is rather lacking or low, or God, why is it not higher? Why hasn't it been filled? But they hold it to the fountain with expectancy, ready for it to be filled to overflowing. This psalm then concludes with some very telling verses on the nature of a God who comes through and honours the vows that he makes in covenant. His vows never fail. His vows aren't weak or just for show. There's a song that we sometimes sing called Pieces, and there's a beautiful part of the bridge where it says, his vows are good. Love's vows never fail. The true love's vows never fail. He is faithful. Yet here, God laments at the fact that he hasn't been able to do just that he hasn't been able to fill his vows. But it's not because he isn't willing, but it's because Israel hasn't allowed him to, through their choices and their actions. By disobeying him, by breaking their covenant with God, they chose a different path. They chose their own way. If you tuned in on Sunday, hopefully one of the pictures that did come up was the two signs. One was God's way with one arrow, like a road sign, and the other was my way with 4 different arrows and no exit. What way have we chosen, just like the Israelites? He's now unable to, often in those moments when he's chosen his way, to do any of the tasks that he said he'd do, because he won't break in or force his way in. It's not because he can't, but it's because he's not a forceful God. He's not a God that will force his way into those relationships. He's a God of invitation, a God of covenant relationship. Much like the well-known image of Jesus knocking at the door of our lives, he's not just going to barge in. He's waiting for the invitation, waiting for it to be opened up, and for him to be allowed in. And so just as with that image of which way it's choosing, and just as, again, thinking of the image of holding our cup into the fountain, where is it that we are doing that with God? What areas of our lives maybe haven't we allowed God to come into? Or are we actually yearning for God's promises to break in, or yearning for God to break in, yet we haven't quite yielded it to him? For if only Israel walked in step with God every moment, if only they followed him in his ways as this yearning that God is speaking here, then he could bless them, then he could fill the promises that he had made in the covenant and honor his relationship with Israel. And it's the same for us today. It's a timely reminder for us today. It draws to mind the nature of God, his character and his person, and the promises that he has given to us. What has he already done for us? Who is he for us? What are the promises he's saying he will fulfill, all those promises that we are yearning, that we are longing for? The question is, are we allowing him entry into our lives and giving him permission to walk with us in relationship in our whole lives, or in those areas? Has everything been yielded to him in surrender? To close, there's a song that hopefully has come up in the description for today's video called Open Up, Let the Light In by Steffany, Gretzinger. And it's a really simple song. It is literally that line again and again: open up, let the light in, let him enter and commune with you. And it's a timely reminder again today, whether for the first time or for the 100th time. And I'd encourage us to listen to this today, tune into that moment of relationship with God. As I said, yes, that covenant relationship with God, and almost picture yourself surrendering again, if there's a particular area that you know of this morning, listen to this song, and particularly yield that to him, or go in that process of yielding that to him, praying that through, wrestling that through with him, and coming to that place of surrender. So thank you for joining me this morning. I pray every blessing upon you, and hopefully if you are somewhere anywhere near where I am, you've got glorious sunshine. So and be blessed with the weather today. Enjoy this weather and enjoy this time with God. And I really particularly pray that you see those moments breaking into your life, the promises, the fulfillment, and you are able to open up and let the light in.